Good morning, good morning, good morning. So, want to welcome everyone to our InForum. Thank you for getting through the traffic and getting here. Appreciate all of that. We're about to get our program started, so I'm going to welcome to the stage our entrepreneur in residence, Sanjay Parekh, United Way Greater Atlanta.
Morning, everybody. Traffic was a bear, wasn't it? I don't know, but y'all, I came down 85 South and did not really fully realize that college is back in, and that's probably a lot of what it was. So it's nice to see that activity, just not on the highways necessarily. Like Alvin said, I am the new entrepreneur in residence at United Way. I've been a tech entrepreneur for a little over 25 years. And earlier this year, I saw this opportunity to come and be a part of United Way. And really what this role is about launching new ventures for United Way to help build earned revenue for United Way. Instead of having to rely solely on donations. So it's an exciting time, I think, for me. As an entrepreneur, I get to play in a lot of different areas and learn a lot of different things, which if you know entrepreneurs, that's what we love to do. And so it's been a lot of fun already. I'm just a week shy of the 5-month mark. So it's still a little bit of a fire hose. So if you come and ask me things about what we're doing, it's going to be a little bit of deer in the headlights, but it is a lot of fun. So first of all, I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me for a few minutes to welcome y'all. This series is about sharing the Child Wellbeing Index kind of results and kind of the impact that this has on children across Metro Atlanta. A lot of people know me for tech startups, but I actually have a history as when I was younger in small businesses. So a lot of people don't know, I was born and raised in Kentucky. Anybody from Lexington, Kentucky? Oh, there you go. See, there's always somebody from Kentucky. That's awesome. But my dad came and got a job at the CDC, which is what brought us down to Atlanta back in '88. We had an alteration store, and I was 14 years old, an alteration store, and he turned over the books to me. So I had to do payroll and balance the books and all that stuff, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I figured it all out and got it done when I was 14 years old. And so since then, I've had this appreciation towards business and small business in particular. And I know we hear so much about big businesses and big companies and tech startups and all that stuff, but the reality is, most people work in small businesses. They're really the engine of the economy and where everything really happens. So I'm really excited to be here and for us to have this discussion. I'd like to thank our sponsors here, Kaiser Permanente and Publix Supermarket Charities, for sponsoring this. I'd also like to recognize any of our folks on our advisory committees or advisory board members that might be here. If you could stand and we could recognize you, if there's anybody here. There's not, well, yeah, we can still clap for them anyways. They're here in spirit. And then finally, before we get going, I want to point out the QR code that you've got on your tables on those tents there. If you scan those, there's an electronic workbook that you can utilize as a tool that will show you the data and insights that we're going to be talking about all throughout the day. And I think that's about it. And with that, I will turn it back over to Alvin. Thanks so much for being here. I do think so.
You think? Just checking. Want to make sure we show love to our sponsors. So, before I start talking about the index, let me just remind everybody why we're here in terms of these InForums. So, when we first started releasing our index, June 23, we really looked at 2 phases of engagement with our community. And so the first phase was we wanted to take this index, our insights, what we did differently out to the community. The second phase was we wanted to have convenings like this, where we had the opportunity to convene our stakeholders, broadly have panelists who represent different sectors of our community and do deep dives into this index, right? So we did 11 of those last year, everything on workforce development, education, and health. And today is the first of this new fiscal year, and extremely excited about what we're doing today. because not only are we launching this amazing report that hopefully you have a copy in front of you and able to go through, but we are able to also build this conversation, build this narrative about why small businesses are so important to our country, but also specifically to improving the child well-being in our communities. And so excited about today. I am a product of a small business home. Mother had a transportation business. Brother had a transportation business. Uncles had taxi services. I've had a consulting company for 22 years. So this idea of entrepreneurship and how can we really make sure our resources stay in our community and build new opportunities for so many residents is extremely dear to me. And I'm glad we were able to make this conversation and connect it to our Child Wellbeing Index. Because for many who don't understand our index, they just think about it in terms of, you see child and you just think, oh, well, United Way is just focused on children. Yes, children are important to us, but they're important to us because we understand that part of how you improve the lives of children is also improving the lives of families. How do you improve the lives of children and families? Well, when you think about the situations in which they are thriving, children's families thrive in communities where businesses are thriving. Organizations around them, the institutions around them are thriving. So for us, when we think child well-being, we think very holistically. And so this child well-being index is our way of gauging how well we as a community are doing to serve. So not just United Way, we as a community, how are we doing to serve our children and families in our community? The index is made up of 16 measures. When we first started, it was 14. We've ultimately moved up to 16. We used to release it by zip code. Now we do it by census tracts. And it is still our way of how do we one of the ways we use to inform how we invest, how we build partnerships, but also it's also things that we leverage to build thought partnerships, thought leaderships. So excited to have Atlanta Wealth talk about this research, because that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish, is make this index available to an entire community to suit their needs. And so this is our list of our measures, right? So we have 16 of them, from child to family to community. And again, it represents that holistic perspective of how are we going to impact our community. And there are actually 3 new ones where you see student mobility score is one that we added this year. Access to broadband internet is one that we added this year, along with food accessibility, right? And all of that came out of the conversations we had with our stakeholders, that when we went from the 2019 release to this release, as we asked them, how can we make this index better? The information we got informed how we landed on those 3 measures. Another one that we added was the 16 to 19-year-olds that are enrolled in school and the workforce, but that was a replacement for CCRPI. So new index with some new insights, and excited about how it's grown, because there are over 150 organizations currently that we've logged that are using this index to guide their strategic planning, to get investments, as well as to establish needs for where they are. So if you are an organization that use our index, please come up to me at some point today. I will add you to our official list of child well-being adopters, people who use this index to inform their work. Quickly, I want to just go over some of our insights. So this is what you will see on our website when you look at our map of our child well-being footprint, the 13 counties that we represent. And so when we get that data, essentially we create a score for the entire region, for each of the county, as well as the 1,260 census tracts that we are responsible for in Greater Atlanta. And once we create that score, we then put those census tracts in a category of from highest need, high need, average need, less need, the least need, give it a color, thus the heat map. And so it gives you a visual demonstration of where are the needs in our community. And so that's part of the power. But the insights that we gained based on this release, one is when you look at those 1,260 census tracts, there are about 1.2 children in those census tracts. 500,000 of those kids live in the highest need and high need communities. So if my COO, Tim, was here, whenever I say that 500,000 number, he reminds me that's like filling up Mercedes-Benz 5 times. To give you a sense of the gravity of how many children are living in highest need, high need communities. Another insight that we learned, when we compared our scores from 2019 to 2022 in terms of our milestones, the 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, we did see some declines throughout our region, right? And so the academic recovery was a major theme in terms of what we see as an insight, because academic recovery is huge for our educators. The idea that we still need to invest in tutoring, we still need to invest in resources that to support our educators was a major insight. 3rd insight that we want to lift up. When you look at those highest need and high need communities, those 2 categories of child well-being, 505 census tracts. So we had 1,260 overall. 505 census tracts are in the highest need and high need categories, right? So almost 40% of our census tracts are in those 2 categories. When we compared the results from 2019 to 2022, when we looked at the results, 79 of those 505 census tracts have declined. So think about that in terms of what that experience is like. So not only in 2019 were you high need and highest need, but it's actually got worse for those children and families. And so while I want to end there in terms of the insights, because part of the data that we're going to talk about, as well as the experience of small businesses, is that many of these small businesses are in these highest need and high need communities. And everyone in here you're here because you care about improving your community. Part of what I want you to think about in terms of how you can make a difference in those communities is how can we support some of those businesses in those highest need community. That's part of, as I read this report, that's a big part of my takeaway, is that, yes, access to resources, grants, money, essential. Yes, policies, things that we can make a difference, essential. But if we're not spending our money in these places, policy's not going to make too much of a difference. So this is some of the data we pulled together in terms of what's happening with the small businesses in our community, how vital they are. And as I mentioned earlier, product of small business. And so I am clear that without small businesses, in some of the worst economy phases of this country, if it wasn't for small businesses, we wouldn't be here where we are in terms of our economy. So I'm excited to hear what Atlanta Wealth is going to share. The idea that they took our index and did the research is like all of that. As my daughter says, it's everything. That's what my daughter says. Dad, it's everything. So it's everything. So I'm going to bring up to the stage Brother Jared. And so let me first say that as a senior research associate in Atlanta Wealth Building Initiative, Jared leads research efforts focused on community wealth building strategies, works to align community insights with policy solutions to close the racial wealth gap. He holds a Master's of Public Policy from USC and a Bachelor's in Human and Organizational Development from Vanderbilt. Please, without further ado, I welcome Jared to the stage. Take that too.
Good morning, everyone. I fear I may not be as engaging as Alvin, being able to walk around. I have to present some data, so there's some talking points here, so bear with me. My name is Jared Bethia, as he mentioned. I'm the Senior Research and Policy Associate here at the Atlanta Wealth Building Initiative. And so this brief that you all should have a hard copy in your hands is titled Standing on Business. And so this brief is a compilation of business owner interviews, data sets about Black-owned businesses in the city. And what we do here is we aim to examine the relationships between small Black-owned businesses across the city and how it relates to neighborhood well-being, using the Child Well-Being Index as a proxy for that. So in the fall of last year, we took our community engaged research on the road, going to meet the business owners directly where they were. And so during our interview, we learned that Buzz Coffee, which was one of the first businesses, the first business in the revival of the Cascade Heights historically Black commercial corridor over in Cascade, would be closing their doors just after 5 short years, which would be the standard lease time for a business. We learned that they were closing their business due to a 22.2% increase in rent. And so the closure of these Black-owned businesses in Atlanta threatens the core identities and economic vibrancy of the city's historically Black neighborhoods, really making the case for why we should, begin to protect them. So in this report, we find that there is a strong, statistically significant correlation between the density of Black-owned businesses and increased well-being for Black residents in the city. We also find that rising rent prices and the availability of large square footage spaces as opposed to smaller square footage spaces is making it difficult for Black businesses in the city to stay in place or even open. We also find that we need policy reform in the city to protect legacy businesses from displacement. So when we think about small businesses here, there's somewhat of a discrepancy here. What we'll find is that when we're talking about the SBA, the Small Business Administration for the United States, the federal government, they define a small business as having 500 employees or less. We take a very different approach here, focusing on community and neighborhood businesses, where we're looking at businesses that employ 20 employees or less, really emphasizing this piece of a business that's located in a neighborhood and locale. So using a proprietary data set that we acquired from Dun & Bradstreet, we see that there are 7 small Black-owned businesses for every 1,000 residents here in the city. We also see that small Black-owned businesses employ approximately 6,500 persons in Atlanta's workforce, which is quite significant. We also find that when we look at revenues, that small Black-owned businesses are unfortunately not as profitable as their counterparts, earning about 17 cents for each dollar that other small businesses are making here in the city. I have to say this is probably one of my favorite sections here. I think it really talks to how business owners see themselves, especially embedded in a community setting. And so this quote, I think, captures it quite well. This business owner says, "We are an asset to the community because the community was so devoid of products and services that residents needed and wanted." So that's what we consider ourselves, an asset to the community. And so I would argue that the data supports this. And so here, I would like to once again thank United Way for allowing us to use their Child Wellbeing Index. And so there's a little animation for you there. So by using the Child Wellbeing Index, which takes into account measures of unemployment rates, we're thinking about educational attainment, we're also talking about access to healthcare, and all those other 16 different measures that Alvin mentioned earlier, we can see here that for each additional Black-owned small business, per 1,000 Black residents, the child well-being score is expected to increase by approximately 1.8 points. And so you can see here the strong correlation, a strong positive correlation, might I add, of the presence and density of Black-owned businesses as we begin to move up by 1,000 Black residents. And so what this suggests is that there may be an association between improved neighborhood well-being and the sheer presence and density of small Black-owned businesses across the city. Okay.
If you look around at the businesses, you don't see a whole lot of variety in terms of options until now. Right. And so with the variety of options, now you see now we're speaking to the communities at large. We're not speaking to a small pocket of people. We're speaking to, health and wellness. That's everyone, right? So because we're speaking to everyone, we're starting to see everyone coming out. to patronize these businesses as opposed to, fried chicken, some of the businesses that you see.
And so that quote is in response to asking the business owner how their demographics have changed or their customer base has changed as the neighborhood has begun to change. And as more businesses are coming to the community, what does that look like? And what they're describing here is that now that we're seeing that different types of businesses, Black-owned businesses are entering communities, the types of patrons are expanding, really once again underscoring that the presence and density of these businesses begins to revitalize and help these neighborhoods thrive. And so we also, in this brief, really wanted to talk about what some threats to the businesses look like, and thus threats to neighborhood well-being. And so the two major pieces that we have are going to be access to capital and then commercial affordability challenges. And so as I kind of mentioned earlier, this piece of what it looks like for businesses to be able to afford space, but also be able to get the money to get into those spaces and keep them running, right? And so this data point kind of speaks to that finding. We'll see that nationally, only 20% of Black-owned businesses are approved for financing. And that statistic does improve quite a bit when we're looking at Georgia in particular, where about 50% of firms are approved for some level of funding. And so 50% of Black-owned businesses are approved for some level. So that's not all Black-owned businesses, and that's not even the entire amount that they may have applied for. It's just to say that they were able to access some kind of funding. And so here we have another business owner voice as well.
The new lease had a 25% increase in the rent. And I mean, it was a struggle to get through the first 5 years. So to get to time myself down to another 5 years at a higher rate with inflation, with interest rates rising, I couldn't do it by myself. So I didn't sign the lease, but we went month to month with the hopes that I would be able to cultivate some investors. I had already been cultivating them. I didn't get enough time, essentially, to do that. So within 15 days, the landlord served me notice, which is why I'm leaving.
And so that there is a business owner talking about their struggles with commercial affordability in their particular neighborhood. And so our data also looks at rental rates, commercial rental rates in Atlanta's majority Black zip codes. And so what we'll see is that Atlanta's majority Black zip codes experienced a higher rate of increase compared to majority white zip codes. And in fact, they actually experienced a higher rate of increase than the city altogether, which is going to be that middle bar there in the graph for you. Now, to be statistically correct and factual, we would really like to point out that the absolute increase in rent is actually higher in majority white neighborhoods and at the city at large. And so what you'll see is the yellow line is going to be majority white zip codes, the red bars are going to be majority Black zip codes, and the purple bars are going to be the overall, so the city average. And so when we're looking at this, we can see that for majority Black zip codes, it's almost doubled, whereas that has not happened at the city at large, as well as the majority white zip codes. But what it does indicate, though, is it shows that increasing marketing pressures are happening in majority Black zip codes due to the sharp increase in rental rates. So we performed a little bit of cost modeling as well, looking at the current rental rates in majority Black zip codes, median available square footage, and revenue data for Black-owned businesses. And so here we were able to estimate what business owners would be able to pay, keeping in mind the kind of conversation that we had with business owners that they would like to pay about 10%, no more than 10% of their revenue towards rent. And so when we're thinking about that, you can see that most majority Black businesses here in Atlanta, we can see that in Atlanta's majority Black neighborhoods, the monthly rent that those businesses could afford would be $4,167. And we see that there's a discrepancy here where when we're looking at the available the properties that are available for lease and the rental rates as they relate to that it's about $6,802. So there's about a $2,600 difference when we're thinking about what businesses can afford or would like to afford, and then what the actual current market is yielding. We also take a look here at some vacancy rates. And so we look at vacancy rates and find that majority Black zip codes, vacancy rates have plummeted in the past 10 years. And so while this could be advantageous for stimulating the economy, and it also adds market pressures as well for small Black business owners, particularly those legacy business owners that have been operating in the community for some time. As we're thinking about, people who are in those neighborhoods and new spaces being added in, these vacancy rates that are going lower are going to be driving up prices as well. And so you'll see in the red line here, it's about 2.77% now in Atlanta's majority Black zip codes, is that you'll see that's what the vacancy rate is. And so we're unable to say what's currently contributing to those lower vacancy rates, but we can commit to doing a deeper analysis of who has purchased these buildings and comparing our findings to the trend in the broader real estate market of investors purchasing buildings, holding buildings, and waiting for the values to go up in some of these majority Black neighborhoods where we know those buildings are devalued at the moment. So, our conclusion and recommendations here. I'd like to conclude with one. We asked the business owner, how would they describe a historically Black commercial corridor, and what does a thriving Black business district look like? And their answer, I think, really captures the essence of what we would like this paper to be and the recommendations we put forth.
How would I define it? A business that is Black owned, like the building is owned. I mean, I would start there with the ownership, right? Because we can rent all day, but I think if you own the building, then that's due to volumes, legacy.
And so, some recommendations from our brief here is that, one, we would like to launch a vacancy tax that would deter unscrupulous investors from purchasing property with limited intent to activate it. And so when we're thinking about that, there's actually been a proposal from City Council as well to put forth a blight tax, which would essentially be kind of the same thing here. When we're thinking about people who are holding onto those properties with no intent to kind of activate them, really incentivizing them to do so by having higher taxes. We would really like to dedicate public funds to supporting commercial tenant rental assistance. As we saw during the pandemic, lots of Black businesses closed, but making sure that we have that type of support ongoing, especially considering the economy that Atlanta is facing right now, being it's a hotspot, making sure that those businesses have the opportunity to stay in place. Partner with those local mission-driven developers to develop smaller retail space and community-owned real estate. So as I kind of had the conversation earlier, the rental space that's available in a lot of these neighborhoods is too large in square footage. Small businesses are looking for micro spaces, are looking for spaces under 1,000 square feet. A lot of what's available is over that. So making sure that we're partnering with people who have a connection to the community and are willing to develop spaces that are affordable for small businesses. Enact a legacy businesses program to support historically Black commercial corridors. As we know, these businesses are vital fixtures of the community, and so that has actually been a legislation that's been, I believe, passed today or passed this past week. The city has put in place a legacy businesses program, and so we'll be taking some time to look at that policy and give some comments about whether or not we think it's going to be fully effective. And then lastly, establish a strong resource navigator to help local businesses discover, apply for, and secure capital. And so as I said earlier, one of the large challenges to businesses is access to capital. So making sure that we are taking the time to connect those business owners to capital, making sure they know where those resources are so that they can feel more bolstered and supported as they continue in their entrepreneurship journey, supporting these neighborhoods and these communities. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for allowing me to present. If you did not get a hard copy, there is a QR code here that you can scan to have the virtual copy as well. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. Can we get another round of applause, please? So, just for the record, part of the downside of being engaging and walking around the room is you sometimes got to go back to your talking points, things you missed. So, let me just say, before I go to our next person, that I want to just make sure we lift up what United Way is doing in terms of supporting our small businesses. So one of our initiatives is BRE, which is Building Resilient Entrepreneurs. And through BRE, working with women and BIPOC small businesses, they have the opportunity to gain valuable best practices that can be directly implemented in their businesses while also connecting and building relationships with United Way stakeholders. Second is we have a BIG initiative where United Way lead impact group of small business owners and entrepreneurs. And then the third is Open for Business Fund, where $20 million investment from Wells Fargo specifically for small businesses in the city of Atlanta, which leads directly to our next presenter. Because we have Ms. Cynthia Freeman with Invest Atlanta, and Invest Atlanta was one of our strong partners in terms of our Open for Business Fund. So as she comes up to the stage, let me just quickly say that Ms. Freeman is the Assistant Director of Small Business Development at Invest Atlanta, the City of Atlanta's economic development arm. She has facilitated financing for approximately 150 small businesses, leveraging over $14.7 million in public and private funds. I'm not smart, but that is a lot of money in public and private funds, and has contributed to the creation of 300 jobs in the city. Cynthia has also played a key role in brownfield cleanup projects and developed several small business loan programs, including the $760,000 Atlanta Cares Revolving Loan Fund. So without further ado, please bring a round of applause for Ms. Cynthia Freeman.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Cynthia Freeman, and I'm the Assistant Director for Small Business Development for Invest Atlanta. And for those of you who don't know who we are, Invest Atlanta is the economic development arm for the city of Atlanta. So when you see buildings going up, when you see companies coming to Atlanta, just know that Invest Atlanta had a hand in those developments. We have two divisions in our company. We have our community development division that works with communities on affordable housing and down payment assistance. They work with developers who come to the city to build those type of affordable housing for the community. And again, the key word here is always community. And then we have the Economic Development Department, which my team is a part. We work with corporations. We bring corporations to the city of Atlanta, and then we work with small businesses. My team works strictly with small businesses. We work with them on funding. We work with them on development. We work with them on planning. And I have a team member back here. Raise your hand, Alicia. She's one of the underwriters on our team, and she's an integral part of making sure that small businesses have the proper funding that they need. So when I was asked to speak today on the topic of community and small businesses, it got me to thinking, why would there not be a correlation? Small businesses are in the community, and the owners are teachers and counselors and hairstylists and barbers and medical professionals and finance professionals, but most importantly, they are parents. So when a small business strives, then the community strives, and then the children within the community strive. So as Alvin mentioned, or someone mentioned about, the $20 million that Wells Fargo gifted Invest Atlanta. That $20 million was given to us 2 years ago, and Wells Fargo asked us to develop some small business programs because, as you know, the main problem that small businesses face is the access to capital. So we partnered with United Way. Thank you, United Way. They brought the community aspect to the program. Wells Fargo brought the funding, and then Invest Atlanta brought the expertise in working with small businesses. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the 5 programs that we created with that $20 million. We created the Atlanta Recovery Loan Program, and that program was designed to help small businesses that needed renovations to their spaces, that needed machinery, equipment, furniture fixture, working capital. We allocated $6.2 million to that program, and I'm happy to say as of today, we have allocated all of that money to small businesses in the city of Atlanta. And our second program, the Atlanta Startup Growth Loan Program, was allocated $2 million, and that was for tech startups. Atlanta wants to become, I don't know if we're there yet, but Atlanta wants to become a hub for technology. And so we saw that need, and we set aside $2 million to help tech startups. And again, here we are almost at the end of the year, and we've already allocated that money to over 13 tech startups. And last but not least, this is my favorite program. It's the Commercial Down Payment Assistance Program. We heard so many businesses talk about displacement. And when we hear the word displacement, we think about individuals, we think about families, but we never think about businesses. But so many businesses have come to us to talk about the higher rents. They've been in a building for 10 years, and then the landlord decides to double the rent. So they're facing displacement. Or a business that has been in a property for 10 years, and a developer comes through and tears that property down, and now they're facing displacement. Or this is one that happened to a very good friend of mine. They were in the building for 10 years, and then the landlord decided to sell the building. So now you have to take your business with all your customers and try to find another place to operate your business. And we heard the businesses talk about displacement, but when we started really talking to the businesses in the community, we understood that displacement is a real problem. So we created a fund called the Commercial Down Payment Assistance Program, $3.3 million to help businesses fund purchase of a commercial space rather than trying to lease a commercial space. And I'm happy to say I think we've done maybe about 10 businesses now, and we have maybe a little over $700,000 remaining in that program. We have till December the 31st to get the funds out the door. So if you know anybody that's facing displacement, please send them to us, because we're on a campaign. Somebody back there raised their hand. We're on a campaign to get that money out the door. But in addition to those, we had two other programs, our Commercial Property Improvement Grant, and that's helping owners in commercial property renovate their business. It's a $50,000 grant. This is not a loan, it's a grant. I know small businesses like grants, and so we understood that need, and so we created the grant. And last but not least, we created the Open for Business Technical Assistance Program. So if you know of any small businesses that need help with their business plan, their accounting, their finance strategy, their marketing strategy, or anything that would take their business to the next level, they can be, as long as they have a City of Atlanta business license, then they are eligible for that program as well. So in conclusion, I would just like to say Invest Atlanta is dedicated to helping small businesses. That's who we are. So if you need more information, you can talk to me or Alicia at the end of the program, or write this down: small business loans, loans with an S, at investatlanta.com. And you can reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to provide you with information about our programs, as well as help you with any access to capital that you need. Because in addition to the Open for Business, even though that money is almost out the door, we have 14 other small business programs that we can help small businesses around the city of Atlanta. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. And I'm just like overflowing right now. And really, because it's two reasons. One, many who understand United Way, they really understand us as a strategic investor. We fund hundreds of organizations, right? I think what people don't appreciate is how we convene and catalyze. And like, so as I'm sitting here appreciating the research, as I'm sitting here appreciating the resources, I'm just like sitting back like, this is it, right? Because small business entrepreneurs in the room, please raise your hand. Okay. Right. And so for us, and I used to refer to us as grinders, right? Because we out there in the grind. Opportunity, information is what we are looking for, right? Give me that opportunity, give me that information. That's all I need, right? That's what this is right here, right? We've heard a lot of information, and this whole room is the opportunity. So just excited about what's happening today, and I will keep it moving as we have an amazing panel to share additional information. So it is my pleasure to introduce, thank you again, Miss Cynthia. Can I get a round of applause one more time for Miss Cynthia? So I am very excited to introduce good man Ronald Skeet as our moderator tonight. He's our moderator. Ron Skeet, Vice President of 110, a coalition focused on hiring and advancing Black talent and others without four-year degrees through skill-first hiring. With over 20 years in the nonprofit sector, Ron has a strong background in enhancing organizational effectiveness, leadership development. He holds a master's in education and a bachelor's in economics. Ron began his career a National Science Foundation grant in New York City. All the New York City people in the house. Okay, just checking. Shout out to New York City. Then held leadership roles in Madison Square Boys and Girls Club, Atlanta Education Fund, and Outward Bound Atlanta. He's also managed regional initiatives for the Children's Aid Society and the Salvation Army, focused on youth development and poverty alleviation. Before 110, Ron was Director of Leadership Development at Boys and Girls Club of Atlanta, supporting strategic growth across over 4,000 clubs globally. He's an active member of the Georgia Charter School Association and 100 Black Men of Metro Atlanta. Proud husband, proud father, loves pizza and boom bap hip hop. My man, Ronald.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Wow, I didn't know Alvin was going to read all of that.
Hey.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you today, and we have an esteemed panel that will be very insightful to you and great connections for you as well. As you heard from my background, I've had the privilege of what I like to say, seeing the ecosystem at work as it relates to communities and partnerships that make sense to help poverty alleviation, but also to help see families thrive. So my role at 110, if you're not familiar with 110, it's a newer nonprofit started after the George Floyd tragedy. What is unique about us is that it wasn't a great idea from a community person that then got funded or they had to go out and find investors. The corporate community actually started this, and they don't get enough credit. So some great corporate leaders, Ken Frazier, who was at Merck, Jenny Remedi, who was at IBM, said, how can we help where this country is right now? And they said, we can help because we control jobs. So 110 was launched, funded by a small handful of corporations. Now we're over 60 strong. And our whole goal is fueling the skills first movement. Those who do not have a 4-year degree and getting into the careers of a lifetime where they can change their economic status. We've created in 4 years about $12 billion in economic mobility. And I think that is what this session is all about this morning and how it can start from small businesses right here in Atlanta. Make sense? All right, Perps. So let me introduce to you our esteemed panel. First up, starting at center. This phenomenal leader is right here at Georgia State. Dr. Isabelle Monlouis is a dual professor. Yes, give her all those accolades of practice and associate director for GSU's Russell Center for Entrepreneurship. She nurtures the next generation of entrepreneurs, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give it up again for Dr. Monlouis. Next up, you may have seen this man or seen his face or seen his work somewhere in the past. He claims he's retired, but he probably puts in more hours than me. After a successful career in marketing, advertising, and sales with companies like Procter & Gamble, Ogilvy Mather, the Art Institutes, and more, ladies and gentlemen, for almost 10 years, he's been paying it forward in a variety of organizations from the Urban League, Startup Atlanta, you name it, he's going to share some more please give Larry McHugh a wonderful warm round of applause. And last but not least, an example of small business at work, growth, the pains, and also the highlights of this work. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't heard this name, if you haven't heard of Brown Toy Box, you are missing out. It's at your local Target and soon, I believe, at your local Walmart as well. A great combination. I love it because, again, you heard my background. It's bringing together some of the favorite things that I love: education, children, and science. So please put your hands together for Terri-Nichelle Bradley, CEO of Brown Toy Box. Let's give them all another applause. They look great, don't they? Perfect. So I'm going to kick us off with an easy one here. You heard my hometown, Brooklyn, New York. Go Giants. I'm going to start off with Dr. Monlouis and tell us your hometown and why you fell in love with small business.
So my hometown just hosted the Olympics. Paris, France.
A little brag.
A little brag, that's my hometown, but you could probably hear it in the accent, so I might as well fess up, right? And I fell in love with small business because small business welcomed me when I left corporate America. And I became an accidental entrepreneur. And I learned all the things that I thought I knew but didn't know, but found a thriving community of people who were willing to share and support in a way that I couldn't have expected, but was transformational. And there began my commitment to pay it forward.
Wonderful. Thank you. Larry?
I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and grew up in a small town south of there and had a major goal of just getting out of that town. My grandfather started a men's clothing store that when he had a heart attack, my uncle took over. So it was a family business that did pretty well, and had other uncles that did very well, and was raised by a single mother who was a church secretary. So it was a lot just to get out.
Wonderful. You didn't tell me you were a Steelers fan.
Always.
And Terri?
I am from St. Paul, Minnesota. And I kind of fell in love with entrepreneurship because I realized that it was the key to economic mobility. And that it was a way to create, we always talk about generational wealth, but really creating generational wealth, just not just for my family, but for other families. And so I just got really excited about it and just jumped right in.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. So we just had this great report. Shout out to Brother Gerard again and the team at Atlanta Wealth Building Initiative that spoke to the impact in child well-being. So I'm going to ask Dr. Monlouis to start off with the great work you're doing here. You're actually helping a lot of first-generation college students learn how to start their own business with sound principles. But tell us how that helps child well-being.
Yeah. Can I make a small request?
Yes.
Would you call me Isabelle, please?
Sure, I can.
Wonderful. So I'm at Georgia State University, which is hosting us today. And if you know a little bit about Georgia State, you know that we have a very large student population, about 50,000, give or take a few more. And it's probably one of the most diverse population of students that I've ever come across. But they do have some things in common, right? So a large number of them are first-generation college students, first one in their families, right? First-generation immigrants sometimes, very often Pell Grant recipients, which means that there's a fairly low level of family household income that they have to draw from. And oftentimes they are non-traditional students. They may have responsibilities for dependents, parents, or maybe children or other people they're supporting. So they're very community-oriented to begin with. And they're juggling multiple hats. And one of the things that we discover is that though we're preparing them for careers, because that's one path to economic mobility, we also are preparing them to launch their own businesses. And I'm actually going to quote our friends from the Atlanta Wealth Initiative. Wealth Building Initiative, they've actually published research that shows that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that 97% of Black owned businesses, especially in Atlanta, are solopreneur businesses. And so what we find is that their impulses are to emulate that model of solopreneurship. And with the digital economy, some of them are very lucrative, but many of them are not. And so part of the work that we do is not just to help them think about launching their own business, but help them think about launching a business that will pay them and perhaps others, so maybe employer businesses that can scale, versus a business they have to work. Technically, they work for their business versus having their business work for them. And I think that that's part of the change that we're trying to make, not just help them think bigger, but hold their hand and equip them so that they can create what I like to think the beginning of another domino effect of economic mobility and wealth building in the community.
Wonderful. And Isabelle, as you mentioned, the domino effect, they're in the community. So when we talk about the impact that it can have on a neighborhood and a concentration of Black small businesses in that neighborhood, it seems like it falls right in line with the work that you're leading.
Or that they are leading me through, because I have to say, doing this work, every day you learn from the entrepreneurs, from the other partners in the ecosystem that we frankly partner with, because we think that learning has to be not just academic. I love what you say about skills first. Of course, I work for university. I'm going to rep the degrees. But on the other hand, I think it's really important that they learn skills and that they learn them in the community and sometimes at the knees, working, learning from employers in the community, other small businesses in terms of what to do and perhaps even how to do it better so you can stand on the shoulders of those successful entrepreneurs.
Wonderful. Now, Larry, I'm going to come to you with our next question. You've had a successful career, and as you call it, paying it forward. You're sharing these lessons with entrepreneurs right here. What would you say are some of the top lessons that you think stick or should stick for a sustainable small business to grow?
I think that any business needs resources, and if I can give a plug to startupatlanta.com, it's an organization that shares the resources. If you go on there, the homepage lists the guide to the ecosystem in every co-working space, incubator, accelerator. The biggest section is on funding, and things like access to capital for entrepreneurs is in there. The resources are vast, and I can tell you from personal experience, known Sajay for years, the community is very collaborative and cooperative. As a friend at the Metro Chamber says, Atlanta's secret sauce is collaboration. And even organizations that could be considered direct competitors are supportive of each other in their initiatives. So what I'm telling you is there are a lot of resources out there to help people start businesses, and startupatlanta.com is a great place to go to find out who they are. And in terms of supporting the children, the basic needs of the parents have to be met before they can help their own children. And if you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the physiological needs, air, water, food, shelter. If you don't have those, you're not going to be able to help anybody else either. So you start there, and whether it's the United Way or countless other organizations, there are a lot of resources to help people build families and businesses.
Absolutely, and they grow together, right? Once the family is stable and the household is stable, you don't have to worry about what bill you're going to choose to pay to keep everybody on track, right? And then you can focus on education, those additional opportunities. I'm going to ask this question back to you again, Larry, because I know when I thought about it, I consult a little bit as well, and I talk to other small businesses. The startup funds sound good, but there's always this worry about, a loan. Can you demystify some of that for our small businesses?
I'll take a step back. A lot of people think that the reason they don't have a successful business is a lack of funding. But I'll take it back to what they call customer discovery, knowing who your market is, who you're serving. And in my opinion, the main reason a large number of businesses fail is people don't want to buy what you're selling.
Right.
And before you start a business, you want to find out, is there a real market for what you want to do? Ideas don't float. In terms of the investment thing, I just left the board of directors of the Atlanta Technology Angels. And to give you some context, we get about 25, 30 applications from entrepreneurs every month to apply for funding. We pre-screen that down based on the application to 5 to make a presentation. And from there, we pick 2 to present to the membership. And from there, typically only 1 gets selected. So let's say you've gone from 25 businesses applying for money to 1 that gets money. So it's very competitive. But there, like I said, there are a lot of other resources out there. So getting the funding is a challenge. There are resources, but it's a competitive world. But start with, is your business viable before you start seeking money?
That's a great point, because we always think about, hey, if I had more resources, but not thinking about it from the human design approach there as well. I didn't know you were doing a little Shark Tank there. Oh, that's great. Terry, you've lived this, right, for the last probably, almost 10 years. So tell us what this experience has been like for you, your family, and what you think the impact can be for other families through your work.
Yeah, so when I first started Brown Toy Box, I started it at my dining room table, right? Just my kids at first. We started as a subscription box. And then I was able to get some more customers. And so then it started with some ladies from my church helping me fill those boxes. And now we are in a space just 2 blocks up in the Healy building, paying too much rent. And, you know, and really working to scale our business, right? Because what I know for sure is as I scale Brown Toy Box, I'm able to scale our impact, right? We've always been an impact-driven organization. From the moment that I started, my vision was really to disrupt generational poverty through play. Planting those seeds in kids at the youngest ages about being all the things that they didn't even know were possible, right? So seeing themselves as engineers and marine biologists and all these different things, but doing it in a way that's really fun and really trying to cultivate curiosity more than just careers, cultivating that curiosity and that mindfulness and believing that they can be all of these things. First, exposing them to them, because a lot of the times we'll expose them to something and they're like, they didn't even know anything about it. And then planting that seed of, you too can do this, you too can be this, right? For me as a business owner, it's important to me that I kind of look at a double-sided impact. I want to be able to employ people, right? And the fact that, I don't know where she went, but somebody from my team is here and she is like my right hand, right? But I want to make sure that I can continue to scale my business and be more profitable, but then also be able to share that back with my employees, right? Of course. So because what I know is as I do better and my team does better, that change, there's a ripple effect, right? And so I am investing in making sure that I create something that leaves not only prepares the next generation to compete in the careers of the future, but that I also am able to create a business that are able to employ folks to change the trajectory of their lives. Now, am I there yet? Not quite, right? It takes a lot of partnership. It takes a lot of collaborations. It's funny, when I got reached out to do this panel, I was like, oh, AWBI, they've invested in me. United Way, they've invested in me. So I'm very appreciative of being in this room and the different collaborations and the partnerships that we've been able to make through relationships.
Fantastic. And let's give a round of applause for all the organizations that help incubate, because we know it's not easy. Terry and I first met, I was on the board of a charter school at Atlanta Heights, serving Adamsville, and she came in to make this presentation. It was probably maybe 2 years into the business, I'm not sure. And we were one of those folks that we loved it, but we didn't buy. So Terry, I want you to talk to us a little bit about how you overcame those challenges and got to be at this point here. I think we want to hear that.
Yeah, so, people like to talk about overnight success. And, it's funny because I'm like, the longest overnight success you will ever see, right? I still lay up at night like, oh, God, I got payroll again? That kind of thing, right? Like, stay needing to get paid. It was that when we met, I think we were still doing the subscription. When I look at the different versions of Brown Toy Box, very, very different. We were a curator back then. So in my mind, we've always been social impact focused, right? So it's like, we're going to source some Black and brown creators, and we're going to create these STEAM kits for families, and then we'll deploy those, and we'll do a lot of testing in schools and that kind of stuff too, to make sure that we're creating, you talk about customer fit and all those kind of things, right? And so we started there, and then during the pandemic, and we grew, right? And then during the pandemic, we were able to evolve into a toy company, right? Creating our own IP. I knew I never wanted to be in the subscription box business. It was just the entry point. And never hate your humble beginnings, right? And so that was the entry point to what we were doing. But then we were able to scale during the pandemic into a toy company. I went and I pitched Target, and they said yes. And then it was off to the races, and that's really when community really got involved, and AWBI stepped up, and United Way stepped, because we didn't have the capital to do the product development that we needed to do, right? And consumer product businesses, of which most of the Black companies in Atlanta are really doing consumer products or service-based businesses. So I know that there's this big drive to tech, but that really isn't where most of us are, right? So I think we have to have that conversation, because when we talk about access to capital, we talk about these things, we got to talk about where Black business owners really are, right? We're doing service-based businesses, we're doing restaurants, we're doing barbershops, and we're doing products, right? And so until we really address that and the need for those types of businesses, we're going to always stay behind, right? But after we got into Target, we just really started to focus on what is next, and we always had to be innovative and always stay, because once you do it, everyone's like, I'm gonna do that exact same thing, right? So you have to just continue to be innovative and create the next thing and the next thing, and we did a lot of that through partnerships.
Okay, fantastic. So you've talked about the folks that invested in you, and the Atlanta Wealth Building Initiative, and their data has shown how communities can change. When we think about Atlanta, we think about where you have this concentration of Black businesses. You're going to see a decrease in crime, I'm assuming, with some of those correlations, in addition to families being able to be more stable. Isabelle, I'm going to ask you to think about this policy, right? So institutions that are able to help provide funding and technical assistance are critical to small businesses. What other policy implications can we be thinking about and advocating for, from your perspective, to help see more concentrations of Black small-owned businesses in Atlanta?
Thank you. I must admit I was both dismayed and thrilled by the findings of the of the report. I think my favorite was actually the graph showing that positive correlation between the density of Black small businesses with that new definition and the child being index. And I'm also aware of research that was actually published earlier this year of different contexts. It's Wisconsin. But I was also showing the intergenerational impact of small businesses, and based also on interviews and actual quantitative data. And they were showing that the parents, they had two camps. One camp that was saying, it's helping me, it's helping my family, it's helping my children, it's helping. And another camp that was saying, I have less time, I have less resources. And that brings me back to when we look at the distribution of how much money they were making. Some of them are in survival subsistence spaces. So obviously, right, they're working really hard to keep their business alive. And then the others are, again, have a surplus, from which, of course, they benefit, they have more time, their families benefit. And so I think that this is also an interesting finding, because if we bring it back to some of the Atlanta data and so what we know about how little Black businesses are making, and again, the solopreneurship versus employer businesses, I think that this is one of the places where we could use leverage in order to actually not just help those businesses be more viable long term, maybe more profitable, more able to survive a rent hike, but also to continue to invest in that community investment and that childhood, that child well-being part, right? So I think that's one piece. I think that this finding is super interesting because it shows us a place where we can all collectively work to move that indicator. And so what I'm hoping is what's going to happen is synergies. Because again, I keep thinking about sometimes we want to help everybody, and I'm all in the camp of helping everybody. But when you have scarce resources, sometimes the way you help everybody is by sequencing and by designing first around those who need it most, because that creates inclusive solutions, right? So maybe the elevator was built for somebody who had a wheelchair. But that day that you're walking in with 20 bags of groceries, you're trying to get to the 4th floor. Aren't you happy that you have an elevator? Right? So again, this is the way I think about designing for those who maybe have the most constraints, but how it benefits everybody. Yeah. And in Atlanta, some of the people who have the most constraints are the small businesses, black businesses that actually don't have access to maybe a lot of the traditional sources of funding, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the first part. The second part is I think that there are ways, again, from a policy perspective, I thought it was very interesting, this understanding around the rate hikes. And I've actually had some friends who've had a couple of friends of mine at one of the top 50 restaurants in Atlanta. They were regularly ranked as one of the top 50 restaurants in Atlanta. And they closed for this exact same reason.
Wow.
It was not a lack of business, for sure, because there was always a line. If you didn't have a reservation, you didn't know somebody, you weren't getting in. Okay? It was one of those, right? But they were, in fact, so successful that the person who owned the building hiked the rent by so much that they would not have been able to sustain it unless they had passed a significant hike to the prices to their customers. They could because we were ranked top 50 in Atlanta.
Sure.
But they also had a commitment to the community and the people who had been their customers from get-go, right, from the beginning. And they knew these people would not be able to sustain that hike. And so they decided to close the business, and then they did private pop-ups, but that's a different conversation. So they decided to close the business, and it was heartbreaking because, again, small businesses, community-based businesses, like you said, they're not all digital businesses, but they're all tech.
Right.
They might be more vulnerable to displacement, right? When the location is what matters, when people know you in that neighborhood, when your employees actually live down the street because they know how to commute,
Right.
you can't just move your business. How many small businesses do we know who have actually moved to a different part of Atlanta, and that was the last you heard of them?
Yep.
So it's not just that even if they could find another place, it's that they're not, so I love the part about building resilient businesses and business owners, but the whole point of a community business is that it is built as a part of the community. So you can't just move it around.
Yes.
So I think that so I love some of the suggestions that they've made. And the one nuance that I would add, and you probably have thought about it, maybe you've discarded it as an idea already, is I'm starting to think about, again, how creative can we be even from a policy perspective to incent those who already may have a space to actually share it so we can make a different use of their square footage and they can actually share that space. And I think about this because this is not a black-owned business, but a business that we all know. Somebody just was posting on social a couple days ago, hey, I have 300 square feet, I'm looking for a small business. Not somebody who does exactly what I do because, right, but a complementary business and giving a whole lot of lists who knows somebody, right? And I just love that because this is a well-established business. It has extremely good brand, already draws a good amount of traffic. Already, my understanding is this person owns 2 or 3 of their locations in Atlanta. So they have a level of stability. And then they're using some of that to, again, share the wealth, literally, with somebody else who may only need, let's say, 300 square feet. And I think that if we can have some policy elements, some policy that actually can incentivize this kind of behavior for somebody who may not have just thought about it, I think that we might also be able to make all those businesses more resilient because together they can actually draw more traffic, but also maybe collectively be more able to either buy the space if they don't own it, or at least manage any kind of ups and downs in the rent. So I think that I can't top all the very good work that's been done from a policy perspective, but I think there's nuances that we can add to even make it more local and maybe faster potentially.
That's a great point towards the start as well. And, when we all think about this, right, in communities that we may have grown up with, right, those neighborhood businesses where you maybe as a child or, I know my children, you think one day you might work here in the summer, right? It may be your first job, your first start. It is a whole pathway to economic stability, right? But when we see these businesses closing down, like you mentioned, it now destabilizes not only that strip mall or that area. It's not only an eyesore, but now what is the community and the children in that community actually holding on to think about they can be an entrepreneur as well. Larry, I'm interested, sticking with this theme of, investors, incubation, community support. How do the organizations that you guide and on the board of, how do you connect to communities about what you're doing?
It's pretty easy, actually. I want to be some specifics. 2 of my favorite. Are you familiar with the Urban League of Greater Atlanta and their Entrepreneurship Center? My friend Mark Parham runs that. I was on that board for many years. Then Georgia Tech's Advanced Technology Development Center. We talked about the Russell Center that got those dolls into Target. And they're not just for service businesses, they're consumer packaged goods. But I have, like, Startup Atlanta, the board is a consortium of leaders of different organizations within the community, and we're all working together to try to share information, and I share as much as I can, like on LinkedIn and other things. But there's a lot of things. For example, the Technology Association of Georgia, TAG, that's usually the bigger companies as opposed to, small startups. But they have a program that I'm involved with called Invest Connect, where we're going to connect 5 Black entrepreneurs, small businesses, with investors. And then there's another organization that connects those entrepreneurs with enterprise companies like the Home Depots and UPSs of the world. So there's a lot of people out there trying to help, and it is a true community. The biggest event in town, in the region actually, is Venture Atlanta, which is October 8th and 9th. And that will have about, we got 600 applications to present, and we're now in the process of cutting it down to 80 who will be at this event. But there will be 450 serious investors, from angel capital to venture capital. People can write, smaller checks, and people can write, big 7, 8-figure checks. So again, all that stuff is listed on startupatlanta.com.
Let's go to Startup Atlanta, folks.
So it is a true community.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. So, Terry, this is about child well-being. You're the perfect panelist because you have it in so many ways. You talked about payroll, but your staff started with your children, didn't it?
They did.
Tell us a little bit about that, and I guess share what would you say your top 3 challenges were as you started to scale. So, 1, your family, how they helped you, but then what were those challenges going to scale?
So, I think, when I first started, like I said, it was with my kids around the dining room table. And, one of my sons still work in the business. And, it is truly a family-owned business. But I think the challenge in scaling, the challenge that we're having now even is, I think Alvin mentioned, be a customer, right? I cannot tell you how many school districts in Metro Atlanta have come to me for free things, right? But then I see that they're paying Lakeshore Learning, right? How many organizations ask me to donate different things, and then they're paying other people for things, right? So, I think it's not only offensive, but it's the opposite of what they're saying that they're set out to do, right? So it is a challenge to see us as businesses, right? Not as here's a little bit, here's $10,000, go play with that, right? That doesn't cover my monthly expenses. So, and so I think it really is having real conversations about what the need is, where we are as a business, right? I think, one of our challenges is just even in, we have had a great, we've had a great success in building partnerships, right? So where we didn't have capital, for example, Microsoft is one of our partners that is helping us bring technology into our products, right? As we talk about that constant innovation that we have to do. We've got great corporate partners, those kind of things. But still, even in that, when I think about, all the corporate partners right now that are deciding on what is their holiday program going to look like, right? They've got a Black-owned toy company right here in Atlanta that does educational toys, but yet they spend their money with Mattel and Hasbro and all these other places, but not even looking here, right? So I think about, as we talk and we get the congratulations and the big ups on LinkedIn and those kind of things, but are you putting your money where your mouth is? Right. That thing. I think, when we talk about that commercial rental situation. When y'all talked about that, I was like, yes, because it is so true, right? It is killing us right now, right? Because people think of entrepreneurship as this, like the little Yodel-Lehu man on Price is Right? Like it just goes up. And that's not how it works, right? It's this. And, this has been a tough season for Black businesses. I'm participating in a conversation that the Gathering Spot's going to host next week about what's really happening with Black businesses, because the truth is we have to sometimes wear a mask, right? Because if we're really transparent about how things are going or what's happening in the business, then people are like, oh, see, I don't know if I can put that money there, or I don't know if I could do this, I don't know if I could do that. So we have to continue to wear this mask instead of saying, y'all, it is hard right now. right? Like I've got to do product development right now, but I also have to be paying. And then there's a net 90, and some people are like on net 120. Like how can you ask a small business to accept net 120, right? Like it's just not feasible. And so I think there are really honest conversations that have to be had. And so, I'm 50. I'm like, I don't care. I'll just tell the truth, right? And so I think there are just real challenges that we are facing. I think the beauty of it is that I can have transparent conversations. Where I had knowledge gaps, I was able to fill my advisory board and say, hey, I don't understand this or I don't understand that. And so I have a safe place to say, I don't know, right? I can reach out to Katrina and say, Katrina, do you have any funding? Because right now, that kind of thing. I've reached out to AWS, hey, do y'all have any? And even if they say no, that they know that I'm looking, right? And so I think it's really being able to build those relationships before you even need them.
Okay.
And also always as an entrepreneur, because I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the room, always asking, and do you need anything, right? Is there anything I can do for you? Because I think sometimes we get, we're always like, I want to receive, but we're not giving. We give back to our community 100%, right? We're always out there. We are the Home Depot Backyards Inspired Learning Series partner. We activate Cox Enterprises tent for Science ATL like every year, right? It's all of those things because we want to be present in the community. We go into APS, even though they don't spend any money with us. I'm calling them out. We want to be there. We are a mission-driven business. Yeah. But sometimes we have to make sure not sometimes, always, as a CEO, I've got to make sure that profit is there because otherwise I can't make payroll. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And that's a very real thing that keeps me up at night.
That's fantastic. We got about 5 minutes left. And Terri, I remember that when you presented to our school because you talked about that strong mission and community connection. I was like, well, how is she going to make money? But you've been very successful in that. And recently you've given away merchandise, right? Yeah. That you have overstock. So thank you so much for that. With this last question, I'm going to put it out to everybody. What are some ideas that you either think about or have seen work as it relates to small business collaboration? So we've talked about you shared an idea. Somebody has space. Can you come in with me? Pittsburgh Yards, not too far from here, has some phenomenal maker space as well as builder space, entrepreneur space, office space, et cetera. What are some examples you've seen or even dream of that you want to talk about?
Thank you. I'm going to bring it all the way back to where we started because my maternal grandmother was an entrepreneur. She had a retail store. She had land. They were growing things on the land that she had, and she died very young. Mm. But while she was alive, she provided for her entire family. My grandfather worked for her. She would provide the entire family and her children. And when she passed away, nobody really had yet the skill to actually take on the business. And the business collapsed. And the land was sold. And I have a mother who kept saying, if only my mother had lived. Because my mother was 4 years old when her mother passed away. And that knowledge wasn't passed on yet to the next generation. She was, right? And I think about succession. Because so many, even the black businesses, the business owners who actually are doing well, sometimes they're getting on in years. Sure. Right? And especially if it's not been a business, again, that has employees that have actually learned how to run the business with them, there is not necessarily somebody there yet to pass the business on to. So sometimes when I think about collaboration, I don't just think in terms of between business owners, but I think between generations. Yeah. And I think that, not to say that this is why we should invest in the children, but I'd like to see sort of this intergenerational knowledge building. And some of that collaboration be also in the spaces where reverse mentoring, because all businesses still need to exist in a digital space. Sure. So maybe some reverse mentoring can do some work. And where, again, those people, maybe they've worked very hard, maybe they actually are able to sell those businesses because we can build it in a way that it's not just them, it's something that can be passed on. They can maybe take some of that wealth away, but also set up the next generation in doing that work. And so I think that's a space where I don't think we have as much. I don't know that our community has built as much support. We do a lot about helping people develop new ideas. I don't know how much we're doing to help those businesses for succession. And so that's one of the places I dream about.
Isabelle, I love it.
Raising money is a big challenge, and one of the seminars that I lead in a few places is called Investor Readiness. Before you go and try to raise money, this is what you need to know about your business and what these investors may be looking for. And most of the time it starts with what they call friends and family. But if your friends and family don't have any money, it's kind of tough. And people will say, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, if you don't have any boots, that gets tough too. So, but there are resources out there. Like I said, in startupatlanta.com, the guide to the ecosystem lists funding sources, and there are a lot of them. Invest Atlanta is a great resource. The program I just learned about from Wells Fargo, that had to be in order. They support the Entrepreneurship Center, the Urban League as well. And we talked about Chase supporting the Russell Center. Like I say, there's a lot of collaboration. You're doing a good thing to come here and see what you can learn and take that to the next step to the other organizations. And if I can do anything to help, let me know. I point people in different directions all the time.
Dream collaboration, I think, would be with GSU, actually, right? Listen. So as we write SBIR grants and those kind of things, right? Like, yeah, absolutely. There's so much capital in federal funding with NSF, Department of Education, those kind of things, and we need to have a collaborative partnership with an institution, a higher education, right? And so I would love to be able to work with GSU. I think most of our interns have come from GSU, right? So we are sewing back into that next generation. Like when you talk about being a neighbor, we are the neighbor. We're right off of Broad Street, right? So we want to have all of our best interns have come from GSU, quite frankly. And so, and so, we think that those type of collaborations are really super important to the growth of our business. Again, our corporate relationships and those collaborations where we do different programs or we get doing products, but then they have employee engagement tools, and that's how they use Brown Toy Box. So I think really being creative about collaborations really is really your first priority as a CEO for Brown Toy Box. So because that access to capital, as you know, we're less than 1% venture backed, right? I mean, well under 1%. So and that's drying up even, right? So you've got to find other creative avenues in order to fund your businesses beyond your primary customer, perhaps. And so that's one of those things. Those collaborations have been instrumental in the growth and the sustainability of our business.
Give it up for this fantastic panel, ladies and gentlemen. You've seen it all right here. We're about to go into some small group conversations, but everything from tenacity to evolving your idea. Terry talked about being creative. Larry talked about making sure you're prepared, talking about all the great opportunities that are there to help increase your capacity. And then, of course, Isabelle, one of the most lively panelists I've ever had, brought us home with the foundation of we got to think about the future, right? So not only intentionally, but internally, are you talking about your small business with others, whether it's your own children, your family, so it doesn't just stop with you, so they can add and we can continue to help child well-being. So with that, I think we are done. Thank you very much.
Well done. Well done. One more round of applause, please, for our panel and moderator. Wow. Fascinating conversation. But on the interest of time, I am going to suspend our table discussions because now you're welcome to stay and talk. But I do respect time, and so I want to try to get us out here as close to time as possible, as well as making sure we have time to hear from an additional resource. So please, if Jahari Soward can come up, talk a little bit about AI and some of the changes and challenges, I think, with this group in here, as well as people who are listening on the video. It is essential that we get some of these information out.
Thank you. Thank you. How is everyone? Wasn't that amazing? Let's give them another round of applause. I'm excited to be here. Number one, just to be in a room with so many amazing nonprofit leaders and entrepreneurs and business owners. I think one of the things that we heard resonate in that discussion was really how do we amplify our impact, right? And there's some ways in which we can do that in addition to the amazing resources that was shared, but we cannot dismiss the impact of technology. And one of the ways in which you can amplify that impact that you so much love and you enjoy and how we can create better communities is by leveraging this tool called AI. And I know we look at it as a very futuristic thing, but let's be clear, it is here to stay and it's not going anywhere. And so the opportunity here is how do we embrace it? How do we use it? How do we use it in a responsible way? Beyond the use of this tool called ChatGPT, right? But how do we use it in a way that's really connected to our businesses and connected to our work? I want to talk just really quickly about some opportunities in which you can engage in that pretty fast. So what we do know is that AI not only has the opportunity to improve our efficiencies and the way that we use it, our productivity, but it also has the ability for us to have more personalized experiences. And so that's whether that is how we look at data differently, how we reimagine it within our organization, how we think about it from the lens of chatbots and creating more personalized experiences with our customers. There's ways in which we can use it. But as a leader and as an executive, it's also understanding how do we allow our employees to use it? What is okay? Is there an AI policy? Is there a strategy on how we plan on implementing it? And what are the risks? And so just as much as we want to leverage it, we also want to de-risk it as well. Because what we do know is that AI has the ability, there was a report, McKinsey report, that talks about the impact of AI on businesses, specifically Black businesses. And what we do know is that AI not only has the opportunity to be a huge equalizer for our community and to be a wealth engine and an opportunity to build be an economic engine for our communities. If not done responsibly and if not done well, it can also be a huge risk. And so as a leader and as an executive, you need to know how do you want to leverage this tool in a way that amplifies your impact, but also is done in a responsible way for the community. We've had the opportunity to partner with United Way and with Microsoft on a program called Generative AI Navigation for nonprofit leaders and for business owners. And for the past 2 years, we have been building this program. And I'm so proud that we've had now over almost 100 businesses go through this program and leverage it in a way that's really creating dynamic impact in their organization. Not with an idea to limit individuals working or to remove jobs, right? But actually in a way that it will create new jobs and create new opportunities. And so when you think about what AI can do, if you look at the report, it says 4.5 million new jobs can be created by the use of AI if done responsibly and effectively within your organization. And so there's this program called GAIN, Generative AI Navigation, that launches in October. However, I just want to see by show of hands, is there anyone that's using AI right now within your organization, or if you have an idea of how you would potentially use AI within your organization from an implementation perspective? Fantastic. Well, this program that I'm about to share is exactly for you. It is no cost for the businesses to participate. It is a completely free program. What's amazing about this, though, is that this is around once you have a strategy. So it allows you to take an idea that you want to implement, and with the effect, as long as you have the right tools, meaning the data that supports it, how do we help you move from ideation to implementation? So this isn't about, I have an idea, I want to use ChatGPT better. This is about I have an idea, I have the data, I have the customer data, I know who my target is, but how do I use this to really drive effectiveness? So if you think about automating your sales processes, maybe automating some of your marketing, really looking at your data differently, we will show you how to do that, how to look at tools integration within your organization. Look at the financial capital that it will take to implement AI effectively within your business. Thinking about knowledge management within your organization and onboarding. But even beyond that, how do you do it in a way that is considering AI governance, looking at your data and the privacy and the tools and the controls and the access and your tech infrastructure and your data maturity? All of these things matter. And so those businesses that will win in this next era will be those businesses that invest in their technology infrastructure. It will be those businesses that invest in AI today. And so we want you to take advantage of this opportunity. What's going to happen immediately after this is United Way will send out a follow-up email. In that email will be the flyer for you to apply to that program. The program starts on September 4th. It's a 6-week program. And I know it takes a lot to invest 6 weeks as a business owner. But I will tell you, this will be 6 weeks that will be worth it. 6 weeks in which you will see change, you'll see opportunity, you'll see the impact of that investment. We've had amazing organizations participate in the program, and I'm excited for you to participate. So I look forward to seeing your application. Thank you so much for the opportunity and time, and I'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you.
So before we get out of here, I just have two more asks. So one is, one of the crucial aspects of InForums are the commitment cards that are on your table. Part of what we believe in these InForums is that we don't just want to share the index. We don't just want to share amazing insights, expertise from panel. We want individuals who go through our InForum to be different once they leave. So on your card, on your table is a commitment to community card. And essentially what I'm asking is that you think about what you've heard today and write down one thing that you are committing to do differently as you leave this room to improve child well-being in our communities. Once you write that one thing down, take a picture of it, but leave the commitment card on your table. And we collect them, we process them, we document what is some of the change that people are committing to in our community. The second thing up there is a survey, and we want you to take that because we would love to have your feedback in terms of how we can improve our InForums, in terms of content, execution, and all of that. So that's what that QR code is up there. But first thing is if you could write your commitment card, and then second is to do our survey. And I'll give you a couple of minutes before we wrap up totally. So lastly, I guess as you're filling out the commitment cards, as well as doing our survey. I just want to thank you for coming out today. Really appreciate, again, I know there's a lot of traffic going on in Atlanta, but again, I value the opportunity to engage with us today. Please continue to engage with us. Thank you to Atlanta Wealth in terms of the report that was released and all the great research. Appreciate the partnership. Cynthia, Invest Atlanta, thank you very much. Appreciate that. To our panel, appreciate the content, appreciate the partnership. Looking forward to continue to engage with y'all. Appreciate that. Jahari, appreciate you as well. And of course, thank you to our partners, Kaiser, as well as Publix. Other than that, I just say thank you. Feel free to hang out a little bit if you want to continue to network. I appreciate, as my entrepreneurs and small businesses, that is what we enjoy. So feel free to network a little bit. But other than that, thank you. Have a great day and continue to engage and make a difference in child well-being.